All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining. This is day 3 of Davos. So today we're going to take a little bit of a different approach. I am up here with 2 brilliant educators, also an educator myself. So we're going to be talking about a topic that I think is relevant for all of us, and that is, how do we prepare today's talent for tomorrow? So that could either be you, that could be your children, that could be your family, that could be people in your organizations. This is a topic that's relevant for all of us. And there's been a lot of talk this week about AI, and we'll of course hit on that. There is no future that exists without AI, but there's also another component, and that's the human component. So we'll be spending some time talking about that today. This is a very informal session. We'd love to pull you in, find out what's important to you, how we might be able to help you think about this in terms of your workforce, your family, or also hear from you. So let me start off first and ask my beautiful colleague here to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Davos. I actually like saying that. So today, I won't be saying that anymore. I'm excited to be here. My name is Dr.Lilian Ajayi Ore. I am a lecturer at Columbia University. My background is I'm a data scientist. I'm also a chief marketing officer. I spent a lot of my time split it. I have two universes that I exist in. One is in academia. The other is helping women identify their strength, particularly women in the workforce and women entrepreneurs in different parts of the world. So I started a nonprofit organization called Global Connection for Women. Very fun to what we've been able to do with that organization. And then on the academic side, I'm particularly interested in enabling my students to reach their fullest potential in whatever capacity possible. But my area of study and what I teach my students is digital marketing as well as digital communication strategy and data analytics as well. And so I'm particularly interested in this conversation, and I'm excited to hear from all of you as well. Some of the challenges that we're facing as an academic institution is, are we doing the right thing? Are our courses ready? Is our student ready for the workforce? Are we teaching them, aside from just the academic practices, do they have the skill set to go out there and really get the job and do the job well, excel to their fullest potential? And then in terms of AI, what can we do? How can we set up trust between the students and us? And how can we also continue to contribute to an environment in a way that we are also seen as a thought leader institution when it comes to AI and human-centered design? Now I'll pass it on to Maria.
Welcome, everyone. So happy to be here with, as you can already see, a very esteemed panel. So happy to have you both with us today. My name is Maria Laws, and currently I'm the director of learning here at Ahura AI. But before this job, I was a professor at UC Berkeley. I taught in the CalTeach program, which is where we were developing STEM undergraduates and some graduate students in their teaching abilities, so best teaching practices for STEM education. And prior to that, I spent over 15 years as a high school STEM teacher. And I also worked with teachers for professional development across the state of California where I live. I've also had some really lovely collaborations at UC Berkeley with their graduate school of education and particular research projects around how to do best practices for teacher learning, particularly in STEM. And last year I had the opportunity to work with the Stanford Women's Innovation Leadership Lab to develop some educational research around what does leadership look like and how does it surface differently for women and other underrepresented groups, and how can we build those skills, because we can't wait for the institutions to get ready for us. In the meantime, we need to do some other things. I also help with consulting at firms like Lockheed Martin or Genet Tech as well, and continue to do some research there. But my heart is always with the learner. I think that when I think about where I'm landing on our scale, our spectrum of interests, a lot is around trust and also around centering the learner. That all of us have a personality as a learner, and the more you can connect with who you are as a person, how you approach obstacles, how you engage and persist, and how you show up as your full self at work. These are powerful spaces for motivation, for hope, and for innovation.
What I think is interesting about the 3 of us is we all come from a different perspective. So Maria was largely in K-12 for many years. Dr. Lilian is higher education with multiple universities, so NYU, Columbia, University of Pennsylvania. I'm also a doctor of education, so I'm also at the University of Pennsylvania, but I'm from a practitioner perspective rather than a scholar perspective. And so I think what I want to share in this conversation is each of us carry a unique perspective. For me, I'm a high school dropout. So I struggled significantly with my former education, and at 15, just made the decision I cannot stay in this environment anymore. I wasn't able to learn, I didn't know how to learn. Fast forward, I'm a doctor of education now at the University of Pennsylvania. And so my perspective is enabling and empowering and encouraging humans to learn how to learn. Because once you learn how to learn, you are absolutely unstoppable. If you think about our human potential, it starts and it stops with learning, and it's so powerful. Technology is powerful, yes, it's an enabler, but at the end of the day, our human performance is really driven by ourself and our human potential. And for that, it's about the power of learning. So I want to start really, Lilian, I'm just going to ask you to share your perspective when you think about how you're preparing your students today for tomorrow. And I want to just throw out one caveat real quick, and it's a little bit controversial. I'm going to try to avoid the word future. I know we love the word future. For me, the word future gives us permission to wait. It says that's sometime tomorrow, and we don't need to be focusing on that today. And we talk about the skill gaps. We talk about the talent that needs our support today. It's today. It's not tomorrow. These aren't the skills that we're going to be talking about aren't things that we need 5 or 10 years from now. Everything that I hear in terms of future skills, it's what we need today. Sorry, so I just want to preface, I'm going to avoid the word future if I can.
And for academic setting, tomorrow is every day for us because our students are graduating depending on the levels they're in. So we are constantly preparing our students for tomorrow. And tomorrow sometimes is maybe at the end of the semester or the end of the year. And so one of the things that I've been focusing on is we know that our students are smart. These students are coming into an Ivy League institution. They did very well, Columbia, and now they're accepted. We know they have the skill set to do the work. What's happening now that I'm trying to test in my classroom is this idea of well-being, wellness, and mindfulness. Because retention, as you know, is like the biggest concern in the world when you talk about workforce development and keeping them skill set that they're going to use tomorrow. We don't want them to learn it and forget it, right? There's this great
about memorization.
It's not. It's about how do you create an environment where students feel comfortable. I always get really lovely notes from my students at the end of the semester. But this particular note really stood out to me. And preparing for this talk, I said to myself that I was going to share it. One of the things that my student wrote in her thank you letter to me was, "Thank you, Professor, for not only caring about developing us academically, and preparing us for the skill set that you know that our core requirements for this course, but also making sure that we feel safe and we're okay to learn." And I think a lot of times when we're developing talent, we forget about the conditions they're in. They have personal lives. There are other things that are at play. And I think it's important that when we are designing workforce development, when we're designing this talent learning practices, we need to be focused on the human, which you talk about a lot when I speak to you about what you're doing with your technology. And I think it's important that we think about what's distracting them. What's their concern? In my class, when I start every session, it's almost as if you're in a coaching class. Like the first 5 minutes, I do what they call a wellness check-in. I say, "How are you today? What's in your mind?" And I have a specific topic that I talk about based on reaction from my exercise. And I think, setting the tone for workforce development requires us to also make time to nurture that human side of our learners as well. And I think sometimes we're so in a hurry to teach them, to build that skill set, that we forget that one of the reasons why they're not learning it and retaining that information is because they're dealing with psychological, what have you. I am not by no means, I have a doctorate, but I'm not a well-being person, but I am a human being and I know how to connect with them. And so my students feel vulnerable enough to tell me when they are confronting something, and I can actually refer them to other services that can support them on campus. But at the same time, catering for them allows them to open up, which makes them more apt to absorb a lot of the things that they're learning in my class, and they do very well. And that's what I've seen, that when you nurture the human side of the talent learns faster than you've ever seen before. And my students do very, very well. And they go on to do very well in life because they've already learned how to deal with vulnerabilities and anxieties and challenges and fears and things like that at school. And then when they come into society with these changes, they know exactly what toolkits to reach out for.
I'm so excited to hear you talking about this because one of the reasons I got recruited to UC Berkeley from a high school classroom, which is not probably a typical pathway there, is that we were finding that, I mean, I'm working with all STEM majors, right? They're in the top 10% to even be considered for application to get to Berkeley. And yet in one of the majors I was working in bioengineering, half of the students, fully 50% of the folks that enrolled in that program left by the end of the first semester. And so they were like, okay, we need to talk about some radical ways of working on process to get to the skill set, to build these innovators that have so much potential, but something happened in the middle and we need to figure it out. And speaking to your point, just this idea of the way that I speak to it with my learners of all ages, because adults are not that different. We carry the memories of all of our previous learning experiences with us. And for some of us, that's an advantage. And for others, that can absolutely be a block, a roadblock, right? And so we have to dismantle or disrupt some of that as the I want to say, a restorative space. And if this is feeling like a little too soft and fuzzy, if I could just say, skills development to me is like the iceberg. And as opposed to the glacier, because if you develop this sense of identity and self, that whatever the new obstacle or challenge is, either one that I want to embrace and it's hard, or one I really don't want to but I need to, let's get through it. It requires a sense of self to call upon, to draw from. When you reach that obstacle that requires you to push, what helps you over? For many of us, it's our community, which is great, and also sometimes we're our own worst enemies, and that is absolutely going to affect the programs that we put together for our workforce around AI or any new emerging technology or idea, because you can't focus on the skill alone, you have to focus on the people. Check as the tool, the point of purpose is the people, and that was, I think, what joins us here. And one last thing before I move over, I also really love this idea of blending the idea of a content classroom with all of these other functions. So I would say, so I have an art degree and a science degree, and so teaching particularly the freshmen at the university level, the first day in class, even though it's all technology based and we're doing sciencey stuff, I have an index card and I usually have a prompt on the board that says self as, and then I'll put a word. So it might say self as architect, self as gardener, and we do a 2-minute drawing where they draw themselves as that, or some version. So, I'm drawing myself, that's a stick figure in every one of the pictures, but then some other images. The only 2 rules are no words and you draw the whole time. 2 minutes feels like a very long time at first, and then it isn't by the end. When we finish the semester, it's a way of reflecting on everything we've learned. So self as architect, that's when we were working on lesson planning structure. Self as gardener, that's mindset. This idea of touch points that you can draw on and build a memory path towards somewhere that feels so satisfying that you can celebrate your growth and recall other things as well. So we were building skills, community, celebrating each other's creativity or ridiculousness, but also the conversations that you're talking about came up. That's where you talk about why this looked this way.
Well, to that point, I think you have brought up the word human multiple times. I think we're moving away from the age of technology towards the age of being human. And as part of that, for us to be able to develop talent, there's a phrase that I hear often that I want to encourage people to stop using, which is soft skills. And soft skills are often conflated for our human skills. When you use the phrase soft skills, it's too soft. It's nice, it's fluffy. These skills that we need to be developing today, not tomorrow, not in the future, are our human skills. So either we call them human skills or we call them power skills, because they are very powerful. It is what makes us human. We let technology do technology's job, and we focus on what we can do. And what we can do is develop our human skills. So I'm just curious, Lilian, from your perspective, and I think what you're talking about when you're bringing that consciousness back into class is those human skills.
And I think, Maria mentioned something about culture. I think a lot of times We try to teach a learning practice that is singular. Everybody must learn this way. Everybody should be used to learning this way. And it's funny because when I hear from my students and they talk about where they came from, what the learning structures were, when you talk about human skills, I mean, one of my students, and I don't want to say the country now because this is being recorded, but I was very surprised, like in her undergraduate experience, if she ever raised her hands or even asked a question or even maybe challenged what the professor was saying, this professor will mock the student. Imagine that, talking about human skills. What skills are you developing, professor, who does this? I wish I knew that professor who would send her email. Or even just her peers in the classroom mock her as well. Or in some societies, students are not supposed to say anything. I have students who come to my classroom after 10, 20 years of not working. Of not working in academic spaces or even pursuing a degree, and they're not used to a dialogue. They're not used to an exchange of, what do you think about this idea? I taught you the framework. I taught you how to apply it. But what are your concerns about implications of this application? And they don't have the human skills to respond. They're not used to that. They're like, well, just teach me and let me take a note. I'm like, no, I need you to respond. I'm checking for understanding. I think what's remiss about our teaching, whether it's on the organization side or even academic side, is the fact that we forgot about the learner's journey. We talk about that a lot. Where do they start? What's the environment in which they're learning? How do they feel about how they're learning? And do they understand what they're learning? A lot of teachers just get through the course, they just get those slides up there and just keep going. And I'm not about that. I want to build that human skill. That human skill set that requires you to be present, to be in control, to have an identity, to have a leadership tonality and disposition. And I feel like that's remiss in academia and in other institutions as well, in the organization sense. And we need to restore that. And I think AI is going to force us to have these human skills, because you cannot interact with AI technology without having this particular skill set. There is a prerequisite for using this technology too, and I think a lot of people admit that. They think, oh, I'll just get on AI and put in a keyword and that's it. It doesn't work like that. It's a curated, iterative process. And so we have the responsibility as, learning leaders to really design the learning journey in a way that understands the culture, the dynamics, asks questions if you don't know about their learning culture as well, and really help that individual identify their leadership identity. I remember I was in a discussion recently and someone said, well, not all of our students want to be leaders. And I said, well, leaders of yourself, leaders of your home, leaders of your own individualized human journey. I think leadership is not just managing people, it's leader in society, even individuality is leadership.
I want to ask you this question, and then Maria, I'd love to hear from you. When you're interacting with AI, are you respectful? Do you use please and thank you?
Well, it's a different question. I think for me, when I interact with AI, I'm very much into the task. So I have specific requests that I ask for. And, I think I'm generally kind anyway. And I think my Alexa will tell you this. My Google Home will tell you this as well. Because anytime I talk to her, she always says, thank you so much. You make me feel great, which is nice. So I'm
You ever
very
said thank
polite.
you back?
I always do. Oh my gosh. I always do. And she's always very kind. I think if you're kind to your instrument, it'll be kinder to you. So I think naturally I'm very kind and polite, whether it's a technology or a human being. So the answer is yes.
The reason I asked, and Maria, I'd love to hear it, is I'm just curious if we talk about our skill development and of course AI and technology, my belief is I say please, I say thank you, and I've actually found that the response that I get, if I say please do this for me, I'll then test it and say without being polite. It actually varies in the response. Maria, are you polite to your AI?
I was, and then I was reading, and not that I got mad, that's not, I was, and now. It's more that our company, we do, not only are we working in technology tool innovation, but we also do support businesses, learning institutions around strategy. And so we were looking at some best practices for using AI and just thinking about how to develop that. And one of the best practices that is offered and recommended by the major folks like OpenAI is to not do that.
Interesting.
Because one of the biggest fears that people keep talking about is this idea that they're going to become more human than we are and take over. And so it's almost like a little separation of, it doesn't mean be mean to it, although there have been times I have wanted to yell at ChatGPT, not often, but this idea of, at least for now, leaving a little bit of a barrier and not treating it as that much of a person. But I feel like I tried it at first, but also I am in an AI company and pretty aware of what I think are the real risks versus the existential, maybe someday risks, and I'm kind of interested in the real right now.
What I'm concerned about with that, though, is talking about skills, is people may lose that skill of
Yeah.
being polite. If I spend more time on ChatGPT every day than I do really integrating with anybody else. And so for me, I'm consciously aware, like, continue being polite just so I don't lose that skill. So I appreciate what Sam may have suggested, but be polite.
I will say it's something that I think is a really good point to bring up here, and it actually brings up something else that I was thinking about listening to both of you. First of all, do you not want to go back to school and have only educators like these two to my left? I would say yes, because we really are talking about, there's a colleague of mine at UC Berkeley, is Dr. Ajayi, and he does a lot of consulting for K-12 institutions, and he often says, schools are very worried about our version of skills, which is standards, the standardized tests, kids aren't doing well in a certain thing. And he's really great about talking about yes and, that we can work on that skill, but if the fastest, like space between two lines may not be straight. That if you keep trying to attack the skill, it doesn't always actually build it. And so he's like, you need to, if you really want to disrupt a system that is broken, a pattern or a strategy that isn't working, you don't do it harder or more of it. To disrupt it, you have to work at the process, not the product part. And so for us, this is really where our kind of work in technology was born, that there's all kinds of chat boxes that can help you with the content, but that's assuming you're ready to receive the answer. And for all the reasons we just said, your workers, your colleagues, yourself, you are coming with a lot of things that can either help you with your listening and understanding, or they're going to keep you from engaging. And so that's usually the role of the mentor, the teacher. So, however, in our future life, meaning now life, most of us are doing our learning on our own, in front of our computer, on our cell phone right now. How do we replace or somehow gather the skills of that person to take on the roles themselves? All the things that educators do, right? Project management, cheerleading, celebration, progress checks, all those things that we do in the room with our colleagues, with our learners, you and you're in front of your computer don't have. Is there a way that AI could equalize that so that someone who's had a great experience with school, feeling confident and learns like 5 new Python or whatever other things they're learning, ready for the next challenge, versus someone like, I think in my own family, the two of us that were great at school and the one that isn't necessarily having a history of being great at school, are we having the same experience just on our own with free content online? The answer is no. What can we build with AI to help with that? Could we make a teacher in there, someone that could help you build those skills? And I think, to your point, for sure, Keith, we cannot, to me, I get bored with the skills conversation. I don't mean that rudely, but it's such a small thing. We are not trying to make a bunch of people that do the skill. We want builders. We need innovators. The world is literally burning. Like, we have problems.
Learners.
Yeah, I want us to think bigger than that. And so to do that, I think we need to, I'll even if it feels uncomfortable as leaders, or it feels like it's taking too long and I just need them to know this, but they don't know it. And you just wanting them to isn't going to get there. We need this other bigger platform of support and engagement.
And we're never done. The idea that you finish school and you're finished learning no longer exists. It used to be, you go to school, you learn your education, you get a job, you stay, you retire, and have your pension or whatnot. Now it's learning, unlearning, relearning, learning, unlearning, relearning, and that continues until you die, not until you retire. And I think that's the challenge. I hear a lot of people say, yes, you want to continue learning until you retire. Well, why do you stop learning when you retire? We should never stop learning.
Well, you bring up a good point, and forgive me. It's not even we should never. The idea of AI is that you can't get around it. Like, you're not going to be able to opt out. When you go to your doctor, this is going to be part of how your medical care is delivered. When you were trying to learn, these are things that are going to be a part of your job no matter what your sector. And therefore, you even if you wanted to, you will not be well served. It won't be a neutral. if you decide to opt out. It will actually harm you. And we need to help people have the biggest, best lives they want, that they can. And to do that, it requires folks willing to help disrupt the edges and to help basically harness this tool, as you say, for our own purposes, not someone else's.
And I wanted to add, I gave a talk recently with my students around this idea of top talent. And I think, going back to your point about skills, and yes, we want to develop their skill set, but what is the organization looking for? And why do you need to continue to learn? You want to continue to learn because you want to still be the top talent. Believe it or not, we have our doctorate, but I can only imagine how much more you've read since we graduated from our Penn program, and vice versa, and how many more certificate you and I have gotten, and vice versa for you as well. And so one of the things that organizations are looking for, it's no longer about where you went to school. And you should have seen the room full of, Columbia students, very bright student group. They were shocked. It's about, are you scalable? Are you coachable? Are you an idealist? Organization want to invest in someone who is doing that, which is a lifelong learner. What is your go-to strategy? Are you just going to learn just to learn what you need to do to get by? Those days were gone. We want to send you to Davos to come back and give us a recap of what you learned there. Are you going to be able to structure your time well enough that you're going to bring value back into your organization? Every single one of you are doing that here today, taking notes, taking pictures, highlighting this experience in some fashion. That's what the world needs. So it's no longer an option to, maybe I will learn after I get my PhD, or maybe I will learn after I get my master's. I must continue to learn in order to thrive and to continue to stay in that level of top talent. Now, the concept of top talent, I know, comes with a lot of fear, oh my God, I have to be best at what I do. No, it's about mastery, and I talk about that with my students all the time. It's about giving yourself the opportunity to master the art of what you need to do well at work, to increase value for your team, for your organization, and for your leaders, and for yourself to be able to continue to create value.
And here's the why. I don't care who is saying it. No one knows what the future of work is going to look like. I mean, if we did, we'd all be out buying lottery tickets and be retiring. What we do know is that we need our talent to be agile, adaptable, and resilient.
And
so
coachable.
that, and what?
Coachable.
Yes, coachable. So that when these changes happen, because that's the world that we live in now, it's constant change, we need our talent to be able to adjust. Because we look at an organization, it's driven by the talent. The talent's what's going to determine how that organization is able to adapt or thrive in those changing environments. So I want to just shift a little bit, and for me, when I think about what I want to focus on for the talent, I want to empower and enable and encourage them to take control over their future through the power of learning. And there's a question that I read often: who's responsible for that? Is it the government? Is it your organization? Or is it self? So I have an answer. I have a perspective, but I'd love to hear, Maria, yours.
I'm going to talk about something else that's related to that, but I will talk about all of them together. You have so many big ideas coming to my mind. Because I think it's all and none and all of the above, meaning what I really want to talk about is how all of these ideas about learning, no matter who we're centering as being responsible, is about trust. And I mean this idea that oftentimes learning is a vulnerable position. You are literally on an edge of what you think you can do, and you've decided or trying to decide if you're going to take the next step. And to do that requires a trust in self, which can be work you do or a history you have, or because you have supportive people near you to do that, or the urgency of the moment is so much you feel like you have no choice, that it is going to be better no matter what to do that. And we're working with, on the developmental scale, of folks that we really are helping with that. But as an adult, this is often work you're doing on your own, that next thing. So the trust part, to me, I think you mentioned it earlier in particular, I think I feel such responsibility as an educator, because it's not like it's neutral, oh, they didn't learn it, or I help them. I have have an opportunity to do damage as well. And I think AI is in a similar space. This could be the biggest access point for folks that have never had access to a truly meaningful learning experience, something triumphant. I mean, that's a word I really mean. When I even think about how excited I am when my Fitbit tells me that I actually have drank that much water every day, I'm really motivated to get that, satisfied. That is a real feeling that comes with you and that can amplify to the next bigger challenge. So for me, I feel like I'm less interested in about where it's centered because that might shift, but it is always centered in trust of self, of each other, and that vulnerability is something that I think for us as folks that are advocates of how AI can help with learning, we can't really just keep touting the benefits. We have to build the trust part for people to feel like that vulnerability risk is enough to get the benefit.
So it creates more of an equitable opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think to answer your question, it's a thing of value. Maybe if you are an infant and you're born into a family, you don't get to choose your family, right? We all don't get to choose our family. But when it comes to who is responsible, you are responsible. But the learning leader is also responsible for instilling that trust in that self. So one of the things that I try to do with my students, because I know we're only together for a semester, and if I'm lucky enough, I get to teach them again in another course. But what you want to do is you don't want to create a dependency on you, that they're so used to the way you teach them. You want them to have that trust within themselves so that they can have control and agency as well. So when it comes to deciding outside of graduating, or even now you're in the workforce and you're trying to choose what you want, it has to be based on value. Does this organization value align with my value? I want to be able to continue to contribute value. I want to be able to have an impact in the organization. I want to be able to change the dynamic of my career journey in this organization. And before you step into the organization, do some research. I tell my students all the time, I know you guys have your top 5 companies that you want to work with. Make sure that the culture makes sense for you. I talk about culture a lot. I coach organization on learning culture all the time. And I think sometimes you come into an environment where they don't have a learning culture. And then what do? You're a lifelong learner. Now you're in a space where nobody even wants to talk about learning. And I think that is on the individual, to be quite honest. It's your responsibility. The government piece, it's the organizations, the institutions that are people like us going to the government, appealing to them, and bringing research and scholarship and best practices. And one of the things, I came from international relations. I did international relations in undergrad. I was fortunate enough to work with the UN. I was the youngest. I was a policy negotiator for my country. And one of the things that I love about the UN and just how policies and diplomacy work is everyone is open to suggestions as long as you have evidence and data to support your insights. So I think, the learner has the opportunity in the classroom to build on their own trust of self. And then the learning leaders have the responsibility of inheriting or teaching that student how to learn to trust one another or even trust themselves. And then the learner now stepping into the society has a choice of choosing an organization that aligns with their value, and make sure that learning is one of your values as well, because it's required. It's going to build your confidence. It's going to help you identify your leadership skills. It's going to force you to continue to grow and blossom. And I tell my students all the time, who doesn't want to be identified as a top talent? This is what top talents do, and why not do that as well as a learner in your journey?
I want individuals, particularly humans who are individuals, that doesn't really make sense. I want people in general to take agency of their own learning. And I think that's where technology is that enabler and that differentiator. I'm not going to expect or rely on the government to create my future through learning. Organizations, I'm a chief learning officer for BDO, so I fully support organizations supporting learners, but I believe that we're creating the space for them, we're creating the opportunity for them, but it's up to the individual to do that. And I think that's really where technology can come in to help us.
I was thinking as you were talking about, I think learning for me is always around identity work. again, we have ourselves in boxes sometimes, right? Like again, working with teenagers, I'm the kid who likes alternative music, I'm the athlete, whatever. And those have a value for a time. But I know for myself, again, I have degrees that don't go together. I'm in AI, but I have an art degree, a science degree, and an ed degree. They don't always connect, but they do. There's a thread through each, which is an edge. How do I integrate these things? This idea of being able to cross lanes is coming from this identity of a learner as a creative. And I think the more we could start with identity as a creative, a competent creative, and an innovator, that could land in any number of spaces for the folks that we're trying to develop. And I think it's when I'm talking to you and I'm listening to us, we've got big dreams about how we want to help everyone have their biggest lives. But then I think about, like my supervisor going, yes, and we also need to get this thing made. This is what I need. And I think a lot about this idea of, we go slow to go fast. Meaning, I used to, when I was a new educator, map out the year. I go, there's 170 days, I have 8 units, and I map it out in what seemed like a very logical and satisfying way. Everything's on the calendar day by day. But as you become more veteran, you realize there's a lot more give and take, meaning I might only get through maybe 2 chemistry units the first semester, but we fly. We fly in the spring because we spent that time building the critical skills you're talking about supporting each other, leaning in yourself without being told or needing a huge incentive. Like we build those like learner skills and identity skills. So after that, like coming into the classroom in March and revisiting what it was like in September, how much I needed to lead or pull or push or encourage versus it's like a self-automated machine. I would just encourage you all to think about that, go slowly but fast, that it's worth the investment because then you don't have to do it anymore. It's self-sustaining. I just think about all of our journeys and the joy that comes from obstacles overcome and new skills either discovered or developed. We are bigger than we identify ourselves as being. So the more you hit another edge, the more chances you have to see just how much bigger.
And I want to add that, technology, what it provides us is this structured and unstructured learning. And what I'm seeing now, and I'm doing, you know this because you know me very well, one of the areas I'm focusing on in my new research is around micro-learning and how we can do more in that space. Like how can we support our students and our learners in whatever capacity, wherever they are in their learning journey, in this structured and unstructured environment. A structured environment, as we already know, is an academic setting because we've already chosen your courses for you because you want to get a master's in this or you're getting your undergraduate degree in this or a PhD in this. And so you now come into the technology side where, what you're talking about when you talk about the learner's ownership of their learning is a micro-learning opportunity, whether it's on Instagram or even TikTok or even just a ChatGPT bot that you're playing with. Right? How do we help the learner in those quiet moments when they're on their own and they're learning on their own? And that's something I feel like it's a great area that there's not enough investment and heck, there's not enough research that has been focused on that. But I think that that's where the opportunity is because when that individual feels like they have control over their own learning experience because you've empowered them, you've enabled them, you've shown them in the classroom, you've kind of created the environment to do that. When they step into their homes, when they're on their phone, like I remember I told Keith that I'd come in here and he sent me an article. He said, read on your way because he loves it. He knows I love to read. And so how do we support our learners in these micro-learning moments? How do we help them structure their micro-learning moments, the unstructured time that they have? I feel like that's the gap that I see. I don't know if you see that in your organization as well. Because everything else that we've done so far has been structured. Organization is structured.
It's a start and a stop. You go to class at 8 a.m., you finish at 5 p.m., and sometimes it feels punitive.
Yeah.
Like if I get a message at work saying you have this compliance training, it's like, I'm going to click through as quickly as possible. It's almost like the delineation between train and learning. Training somehow has become punitive. Learning is something that we can take control over, that we can do on our own. and technology can enable us for that. We've got just a couple minutes left, so before we wrap it up, I just want to see if there's any questions. You've got access to two brilliant educators and then myself. Yes.
Yeah. First of all, this is Davide. I'm Italian, but been traveling, living in different countries, and then I have also two children, young, 8 and 10. But I also went through also undergrad and postgrad education. The more I was listening to you, I was saying, okay, but how? I mean, you are already well beyond when you think about UK or US education, where Italy or Spain go. So I was wondering whether how your considerations, right, in a system where you talk about soft skills. I mean, there's nothing on that. It's really books, exams every week. I saw my children write torture every week, and I see now the difference there in the American system. It's like night and day. Now, I've been going through an Italian education, and I'm fine. But I wonder how your perspective, if you have any, could be put when looking at more traditional, let's say, non-Anglo-Saxon education.
I actually think that was actually a big part of our discussions around Ahura, like where we started, is that the disparities, if we will, or just different approaches to learning is the game changer about how far you can go. Minus the part that some of us are already sort of geared that way, right? I mean, I'm betting many of us in the room are sort of like natural learners, whether it was in school or not, but many are not. And so we were thinking, all right, maybe there isn't a teacher that has been trained in a certain way that could be helpful, or maybe there's no teacher at all. There just isn't anyone. Or it's a skill that's so new, there isn't anyone to teach you. What do you do when you're by yourself? And that's really where we were thinking, this is how AI could do something really special. Beyond the chat box about, calculus solutions, what could we do to bring that humanity into the tech to connect with the person as they're learning? So that is literally what we're building right now is as a solution for that. And our goal is really to ensure, part of the problem we see with AI is that its limits is around how it's built and who it's built for. And the best way to disrupt that is to have many voices in the room. But they have to be trained and know that they should be there. And so our goal is by expanding opportunity to deal with what you're talking about, it's going to create a whole new layer and pool of emerging leaders in AI with those experiential perspectives that could help us build even better algorithms, better tools that serve people.
Yeah. So I think, in other words, the good news for you is that the skill set that your children and the people in your country are not getting in the classroom, AI will provide that solution. In addition to that, I go back to a very old tradition. It takes a village. And for me, I'm a mother of 2 children, and I know that my husband and I, we always kind of sit and brainstorm and try to assess what is our son learning in school, because he's the older one, and what he's missing, we teach him at home. And I think I can't wait till my book comes out, because I hope that this book does have this international acceptance as well, because it really puts the ownership on the teacher. Like, we have a responsibility to really develop this talent. And it is our job in that moment that we have in the classroom with them to give them everything that they need to succeed in the next class and then beyond graduation as well. So I think for you, you have a little bit of work to do, which is align your village and teach them the skill set that their school is not teaching them. Because believe it or not, these structures are already in place. It's what we talked about earlier. We talked about structural learning. They're not going to change the structure anytime soon, right? One of the things that I was part of a pre-college programs. Parents will send their children to come take classes at colleges. You may want to look into that. And I teach it in the summertime, and I have students from different parts of the world, and their parents' primary concern is, at school, all they teach my kids is just how to learn a textbook and how to memorize and how to do dictation. And they send them to other schools in other countries because they know they'll build traditional skill set, this human-centric skills that my partner here talked about. And I think you have that responsibility of just allowing the world, the global world, to raise your child and your children. And I think we should also complain as parents. This is me wearing my parent hat. It's okay to speak to your university and say, I want my child to develop additional human skills other than just book skills and academic skills. And I think if we don't request it enough, it's never going to change.
we are in the age of humans, human potential, human-centric design, our emotional intelligence. With that, we need to wrap up. So I want to say thank you for both of you joining.
Oh, no, you're okay. Yes.
You have
We're
one
I thought you were
question?
saying go.
Oh, no, you were wrapping up, but that's perfect. Yes. So, yeah, your final statement and
Everyone, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I see when I got my doctorate degree, it felt like I did the same experience as a medical doctor. I have my son asked me all the time, like, Mommy, why are you a doctor? What kind of doctor are you? Because my son wants to be a medical doctor. And I said, I'm an educator doctor. And, you have a responsibility to nurture and to develop and to train and to help that person cope with life in a way that they will continue to learn beyond your classroom. And I think that whatever role that each of you play in whatever capacity, in whatever world you're in, make sure that you go back to that human-centric part of you and make sure that you prepare that individual to be ready for whatever, and also allow them to self-identify and build trust within themselves. Thank you.
When I first came to Ahura, my supervisor asked me to create a science of learning course to help the product development team really think more deeply and more subtle ways about how we could infuse those principles throughout the tool we were building. And I've been teaching a long time, various levels, and I enacted and kind of had a little focus group and made sure I read more papers, books, all the things. And as I started to organize all of this experiential and kind of academic learning, I realized that I had organized things into 6 modules, and yet only one of those modules was about study skills. Everything else was the preparation to be the learner, and then the reflection at the end. That's the thing I think that to me is sort of the difference between the thing you just learned and something that's now yours that you can build upon. That you reflect and analyze how the process went and also what's really resonating. I was really struck by that. That iceberg. The thing that we seem to do most of our strategic planning around is such a small piece of it. And so the things that we're talking about here are the other 5. That these are the things where you amplify the impact of the beautiful, glorious content that you're creating for your team. And I would say the biggest thing around AI and learning is to engage. Engage. That's how we improve it. That's how we get the most out of it. And that's how we build our own.
I'll leave you with one final simple thought. Never stop learning. As simple as that. With that, thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.